Bullies shove the girl's head into the mud in front of the whole school. Big mistake. Elena Rodriguez felt the cold October mud seeping through her pristine white uniform shirt as Cassandra Blackwell's manicured fingers pressed her face deeper into the earth. The entire student body of Thornfield Preparatory had gathered in a perfect circle around the school's central courtyard, their smartphones raised like weapons, recording every humiliating second as the daughter of Connecticut's most powerful tech mogul ground the scholarship student's dignity into the same dirt that would stain her clothes for weeks to come. "This is where you belong," Cassandra hissed, her voice carrying across the courtyard with the authority of someone who had never been denied anything in her 17 years of privileged existence. Face down in the mud with the rest of the trash that somehow slipped through our admissions process. The October wind cut through Elena's soaked clothing as she felt Cassandra's designer boot press against her shoulder blade, pinning her in place while Madison Cross held her recording phone steady, ensuring the perfect angle to capture Elena's complete humiliation. The crowd of students pressed closer, their excited murmurs creating a soundtrack of anticipation for whatever degradation Cassandra had planned next. But what none of them knew, not Cassandra with her limitless family wealth, not Madison with her father's real estate empire, not Sophia Whitmore whose senator mother sat on 3 congressional committees, and certainly not Ashley Kane, whose athletic scholarships to Ivy League universities were already secured through family connections, was that the trembling girl they had systematically tortured for 4 months possessed something far more dangerous than any of their inherited advantages. Elena Rodriguez had been hiding 8 years of lethal combat training, 8 years of disciplined preparation under Master Kim's unforgiving instruction, 8 years of learning how to transform fear into focus and pain into precision. She had been waiting, with the infinite patience her martial arts training had taught her, for exactly this moment when her tormentors would finally cross the line from psychological warfare into physical assault, giving her not just the legal justification, but the moral imperative to show them the difference between inherited privilege and earned strength. As Cassandra's grip loosened slightly, allowing Elena to turn her head just enough to see the ring of faces surrounding her, all recording her humiliation for viral distribution across every social media platform that mattered to their insular world of private school royalty, Elena Rodriguez made a decision that would transform not just her own life, but the entire power structure of Thornfield Preparatory Academy. The quiet scholarship student was about to become the most dangerous person any of them had ever encountered, and the reversal would be so swift, so complete, and so devastating that legends would be told about it for decades to come. But that moment of reckoning was still 30 seconds away. For now, Elena remained motionless in the mud, her breathing steady and controlled, her mind calculating distances and possibilities with the cold precision Master Kim had drilled into her through 8 years of training that had begun when she was 9 years old, and their apartment in Hartford's roughest neighborhood had been broken into for the 3rd time in 6 months. The story of how Elena Rodriguez had arrived at this moment, face down in the courtyard of Connecticut's most exclusive preparatory academy, while the children of senators and tech moguls recorded her humiliation, began 4 months earlier on a humid August morning when she first walked through the wrought iron gates of Thornfield Preparatory with nothing but a single suitcase, a scholarship letter that had taken her mother Maria 3 double shifts at the diner to afford the application fees for, and the desperate hope that education might be their family's escape from generational poverty. Maria Rodriguez had worked 16-hour days for 3 years straight, taking every overtime shift the all-night diner offered, walking to work through Hartford's most dangerous neighborhoods at 2 in the morning because they couldn't afford car insurance. Also, her daughter might have the chance to attend the same school that had educated presidents and Supreme Court justices. The acceptance letter had arrived on a Tuesday in March, and Maria had cried for 20 minutes in the diner's walk-in freezer, where her manager wouldn't see her breakdown from exhaustion and overwhelming relief. Elena understood the magnitude of the sacrifice. She understood that her mother was gambling their family's entire future on her ability to succeed in an environment designed for children whose trust funds contained more money than most families earned in decades. She understood that failure meant not just personal disappointment, but the confirmation of every stereotype about working-class families being inherently inferior to the wealthy elite who controlled institutions like Thornfield Preparatory. What Elena didn't understand, as she walked through those wrought iron gates on her first morning, was that her acceptance had already been marked for destruction by forces more powerful and ruthless than any academic challenge she might face in the classroom. Cassandra Blackwell had been monitoring the scholarship program with the systematic attention her father applied to hostile corporate takeovers. As the daughter of Thomas Blackwell, whose technology conglomerate controlled everything from social media algorithms to government surveillance contracts, Cassandra possessed resources that most students couldn't imagine, and a worldview that considered scholarship students a contamination of Thornfield's carefully maintained exclusivity. She had spent the summer researching Elena Rodriguez with the thoroughness of a professional investigator. She knew about Maria's 3 jobs, about the cramped apartment in Hartford's Section 8 housing, about Elena's father, who had been deported when she was 12, about every academic achievement and every financial struggle that had brought Elena to Thornfield's attention. Most importantly, she knew exactly how to use that information as ammunition in a campaign designed to drive Elena out before Christmas break. Elena's first morning at Thornfield Preparatory began with a carefully orchestrated psychological operation that would have impressed military strategists with its precision and cruelty. She arrived early, hoping to familiarize herself with the campus layout before classes began, only to discover that her schedule had been mysteriously altered overnight. Instead of advanced placement chemistry with Dr. Patterson, whose recommendation letter had been instrumental in her scholarship application, she found herself assigned to remedial mathematics with Mr. Hendricks, a placement that would immediately mark her as academically deficient in the eyes of both students and faculty. The administrative error was the first salvo in Cassandra's campaign, designed to plant immediate doubts about Elena's qualifications while establishing the narrative that scholarship students required special accommodation and lower academic standards. Elena spent her first 2 hours at Thornfield, sitting in a mathematics class reviewing concepts she had mastered in 8th grade, surrounded by students who had been held back multiple times and regarded her presence as confirmation of their own academic limitations. By lunchtime, word had spread throughout Thornfield's carefully stratified social hierarchy that the new scholarship student had been placed in remedial classes, apparently unable to handle the academic rigor that the other students took for granted. The story gained credibility because it aligned perfectly with the assumptions most Thornfield families made about working-class students being inherently less capable than children who had attended private schools since kindergarten. Elena finally received her correct schedule at 2 o'clock, but the damage was done. She entered Dr. Patterson's advanced placement chemistry class 4 hours late, disrupting a complex lecture on organic molecular structures while 30 pairs of eyes evaluated every aspect of her appearance, from her obviously secondhand uniform to her department store shoes to the slight accent that marked her as someone from outside their insular world of inherited privilege. "Miss Rodriguez," Dr. Patterson said with barely concealed irritation, "perhaps you could explain to the class why punctuality seems optional for scholarship recipients." The question was designed to be unanswerable, putting Elena in the impossible position of either defending herself and appearing argumentative or accepting responsibility for an administrative error that wasn't her fault. Elena chose a third option, responding with calm professionalism that demonstrated both respect for authority and quiet confidence in her own abilities. "I apologize for the disruption, Dr. Patterson. There was a scheduling error that has been corrected. I've already reviewed today's material and I'm prepared to participate in tomorrow's laboratory exercise." The response was perfect, showing neither defensiveness nor submission, while making it clear that she belonged in the advanced class, despite the administrative sabotage. Several students exchanged glances, recognizing competence when they saw it. But Elena had already caught Cassandra Blackwell's attention in the worst possible way. Cassandra sat in the 3rd row, her platinum blonde hair falling in perfect waves over a uniform that had been tailored by the same designers who created her mother's congressional wardrobe. Her blue eyes, cold as Arctic ice, evaluated Elena with the calculating precision her father used when identifying companies for hostile acquisition. She saw intelligence, determination, and worst of all, the kind of quiet confidence that couldn't be purchased with family money or inherited through generations of privilege. Elena Rodriguez represented everything Cassandra had been taught to fear and destroy. Merit-based success that threatened the hereditary power structure that kept families like the Blackwells in control of institutions like Thornfield Preparatory. Elena's presence suggested that intelligence and hard work might be more valuable than family connections and inherited wealth, a possibility that struck at the very foundation of Cassandra's identity and worldview. The declaration of war came during Elena's second week at Thornfield, delivered with the precision of a military operation that had been planned with corporate-level sophistication. Elena was eating lunch alone in the cafeteria's far corner, reviewing chemistry notes and trying to remain invisible, when Cassandra approached with her 3 disciples, arranged in perfect formation behind her. Sophia Whitmore flanked Cassandra's left side, her dark hair pulled back in a style that made her look 25 instead of 17. Her gray eyes reflecting the calculating intelligence she had inherited from her senator mother, along with an understanding of how political power could be used to destroy lives with surgical precision. Madison Cross positioned herself on Cassandra's right, her auburn hair catching the cafeteria's fluorescent lights, while her green eyes evaluated Elena like a predator sizing up prey, her father's real estate empire having taught her exactly how to leverage property ownership into social control. Ashley Kane stood directly behind Cassandra, her athletic build and state championship medals marking her as someone accustomed to physical dominance, her full scholarship to Stanford already secured through family connections to the university's board of trustees. Ashley's role in the group dynamic was obvious. She provided the implicit threat of physical violence that gave Cassandra's psychological warfare its edge of genuine danger. "Excuse me," Cassandra said, her voice carrying the manufactured sweetness that wealthy girls used when they wanted to appear reasonable while delivering cruelty with surgical precision. "We're conducting a little investigation, and we need your help with something." Elena kept her eyes on her chemistry textbook, recognizing the tactical setup for what it was, but hoping that non-engagement might convince them to find easier targets elsewhere on campus. The cafeteria had grown noticeably quieter, with conversations stopping at nearby tables as students sensed the predatory tension that always preceded Cassandra's public humiliations. "Some of us have been wondering," Cassandra continued, settling into the chair across from Elena without invitation, while her followers remained standing in positions that blocked potential escape routes, "whether scholarship students are held to the same academic standards as regular students, or if teachers maybe go a little easier on you because of your special circumstances." The question was designed to be unanswerable, implying academic dishonesty regardless of how Elena responded. If she defended her grades, she would appear arrogant and defensive. If she remained silent, her lack of response would be interpreted as admission of guilt. If she tried to leave, it would suggest she had something to hide. Elena chose to respond with simple honesty, keeping her voice level and professional despite the adrenaline beginning to flow through her system. "My grades reflect my understanding of the material. I study hard and I earn my scores through preparation and effort." Sophia leaned forward slightly, her voice carrying the political sophistication she had learned from watching her mother destroy opponents with carefully crafted implications rather than direct accusations. "That's interesting, because some teachers have mentioned concerns about unusual grade patterns among certain students. Apparently, there are questions about whether some assignments might be getting outside assistance." The accusation was delivered with plausible deniability, structured as gossip rather than direct allegation while still planting seeds of doubt about Elena's academic integrity. It was a classic political technique, allowing the speaker to spread damaging rumors while maintaining the ability to deny having made any specific accusations. Madison pulled out her smartphone and began scrolling through what appeared to be social media posts, her voice casual but carrying an unmistakable threat. It's amazing how quickly information spreads these days. One little post about academic integrity concerns, and suddenly everyone's talking about it. College admissions offices pay attention to social media now. They have whole departments dedicated to investigating applicants' reputations. The technological warfare was subtle but devastating, implying that Elena's academic and social reputation could be destroyed with a few strategically placed social media posts that would follow her for years and potentially destroy her college prospects. In an era where digital footprints were permanent and college admissions officers routinely checked applicants' online presence, the threat carried real power. Ashley cracked her knuckles with deliberate menace, her voice carrying the casual confidence of someone accustomed to using physical intimidation to reinforce psychological pressure. Maybe you should think about whether this environment is really the right fit for someone with your background. Sometimes it's better to recognize your limitations before others have to point them out for you. The four girls formed a perfect intimidation unit, each contributing her own specialized form of threat while maintaining enough plausible deniability to avoid obvious misconduct charges. Cassandra provided the leadership and strategic planning. Sophia contributed political sophistication and character assassination techniques. Madison brought technological warfare and social media manipulation. And Ashley supplied the implicit threat of physical violence that made everything else more frightening. Elena gathered her books and stood slowly, her movements controlled and deliberate despite the adrenaline flooding her system. 8 years of martial arts training had taught her to recognize tactical situations and manage her physiological responses under pressure, skills that served her well in psychological combat as much as physical confrontation. "I appreciate your concern," Elena said calmly, her voice carrying quiet confidence that surprised all four girls. "But I'm exactly where I belong. My academic record speaks for itself." The response was perfectly calculated, showing neither fear nor aggression while making it clear that she wouldn't be intimidated into surrender. Elena walked away from the confrontation with dignity intact, but she could feel Cassandra's eyes burning into her back and knew that the psychological warfare had only just begun. That afternoon, Elena walked through Hartford's industrial district to Master Kim's Martial Arts Academy, a converted warehouse that had been her second home for 8 years. The transition from Thornfield Preparatory's Gothic architecture and manicured lawns to the working-class neighborhood where she had grown up was jarring, like traveling between different worlds that operated according to completely different rules and values. Master Kim's Academy occupied 15,000 square feet of converted warehouse space, with hardwood floors that had been refinished so many times they gleamed like mirrors under the fluorescent lights. Heavy bags hung from steel beams that could support the weight of serious training equipment, while mirrors covered 3 walls to allow students to monitor their form during practice. The space smelled of leather, sweat, and the cleaning products Master Kim insisted on using to maintain surgical cleanliness throughout the facility. Elena had first walked through those doors when she was 9 years old, brought by her mother after their apartment had been broken into for the 3rd time in 6 months. Maria Rodriguez had been desperate to give her daughter some means of protection in a neighborhood where violence was a constant threat. But neither of them had expected that basic self-defense classes would evolve into something far more serious and demanding. Master Kim had recognized something unusual in the frightened girl who first entered his academy. Elena possessed a natural combination of intelligence, determination, and what he called warrior instinct, the ability to remain calm under pressure while making strategic decisions quickly and accurately. Under his demanding instruction, she had earned black belts in 3 different martial arts disciplines and competed successfully in regional tournaments, though she kept those achievements as private as everything else in her carefully constructed invisible life. The training regimen Master Kim had designed for Elena went far beyond basic self-defense techniques. He had taught her to read tactical situations, recognize potential threats before they materialized, and respond to aggression with precisely calibrated force that would neutralize dangers without escalating conflicts unnecessarily. Most importantly, he had taught her patience and strategic thinking, the ability to endure temporary defeats while preparing for eventual victory. "Your technique is flawless," Master Kim observed as Elena moved through advanced kata sequences with the fluid precision of someone who had practiced the same movements thousands of times under demanding conditions. But your mind is clouded with frustration and anger. Tell me about the source of this distraction." Elena hesitated, then described the psychological warfare campaign that Cassandra had launched against her. Master Kim listened without interruption, his experienced eyes reading the tactical situation with the precision of someone who had spent decades preparing students for real-world violence and understood that psychological combat could be just as dangerous as physical assault. "Document everything," he advised when she finished her account. "Build comprehensive evidence files that will support your position when the situation escalates. Create alliances with people who value justice over privilege, and prepare yourself mentally and physically for confrontation that cannot be avoided through diplomacy." The guidance was tactical rather than emotional, based on Master Kim's understanding that privileged bullies like Cassandra didn't respond to appeals for fairness or basic human decency. They only modified their behavior when forced to confront consequences they couldn't manipulate or avoid, which meant Elena needed to be prepared for escalation rather than hoping for peaceful resolution. Over the following weeks, Cassandra's campaign against Elena intensified with corporate-level sophistication and military precision. The harassment evolved from simple intimidation into a comprehensive psychological warfare operation designed to destroy Elena's academic performance, social standing, and mental health with systematic thoroughness that demonstrated both strategic planning and unlimited resources. Elena's locker was vandalized with permanent marker, featuring messages like "Welfare Queen" and "Charity Case," written in expensive calligraphy that suggested private school education and careful planning. Her textbooks disappeared from her bag, only to be found hours later in bathroom toilets, with pages dissolved into illegible pulp, forcing her to purchase replacement materials her family couldn't afford. Anonymous notes appeared in her locker questioning her academic integrity, written on stationery that cost more per sheet than Elena's family spent on groceries in a week. The expensive paper carried the subtle fragrance of designer perfume, making it clear that the harassment came from students whose families could afford luxury items as casual accessories to psychological warfare. The technological component of Cassandra's campaign was particularly sophisticated, involving cyber attacks that crashed Elena's email account repeatedly and deleted homework assignments just before deadlines. Social media posts appeared across multiple platforms, spreading carefully crafted rumors about Elena's academic integrity, written to sound plausible while being impossible to disprove definitively. Dr. Patterson, who had initially praised Elena's exceptional understanding of organic chemistry, began watching her with obvious suspicion during tests and laboratory exercises. Teachers who had recommended her for advanced placement programs suddenly grew distant and professional, their enthusiasm for her academic potential replaced by careful neutrality that suggested concerns about her character and qualifications. The poison was spreading through Thornfield's faculty with surgical precision, administered through concerned phone calls from influential parents who expressed worries about academic standards and the integrity of the scholarship program. Cassandra's father had perfected the art of destroying reputations through seemingly reasonable concerns, and those techniques proved devastatingly effective in an educational environment where perception often mattered more than reality. But Elena was using the harassment campaign as training in its own right, documenting every incident with the methodical precision Master Kim had taught her while building evidence files that would eventually support legal action if the situation escalated beyond what she could handle through other means. She photographed the vandalized locker, saved the anonymous notes, and maintained detailed records of every suspicious technical failure that conveniently occurred during important academic deadlines. More importantly, she was building alliances with other students who had been targeted by Cassandra's systematic campaign of exclusion and intimidation. Jamie Chen, editor of Thornfield's student newspaper, had been quietly documenting harassment patterns for months while investigating what appeared to be a coordinated effort to drive scholarship students away from the academy. Jamie's investigation had revealed that Elena was the 6th scholarship student to be targeted by similar campaigns over the past 3 years, with previous victims either transferring to other schools or having their scholarships revoked following carefully orchestrated academic integrity scandals. The pattern suggested systematic discrimination rather than isolated incidents, which carried significant legal implications under federal civil rights legislation. The psychological pressure was designed to break Elena's focus and academic performance, creating the evidence Cassandra needed to justify her narrative about undeserving scholarship students being unable to handle Thornfield's academic rigor. Every technical failure, every missing assignment, every moment of distraction caused by harassment was intended to create a downward spiral that would ultimately confirm the stereotypes about working-class students being inherently inferior to their wealthy classmates. But Elena had learned patience and strategic thinking from 8 years of martial arts discipline. She maintained her academic performance through sheer determination and superior study habits, refusing to let psychological warfare undermine the educational opportunity her mother had sacrificed everything to provide. She also continued training with Master Kim every afternoon, preparing for the inevitable physical confrontation that would come when Cassandra realized that psychological pressure alone wouldn't be sufficient to drive Elena away from Thornfield. The second major escalation came during Elena's 6th week at Thornfield, orchestrated with the precision of a military operation that demonstrated both tactical sophistication and complete disregard for Elena's basic human dignity. Elena was leaving the library after hours when Cassandra and her 3 disciples cornered her in the deserted east hallway, having clearly planned the encounter to avoid witnesses and security cameras. "We need to have a conversation," Cassandra announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience, while her followers automatically positioned themselves to block potential escape routes. "Some people think you're getting a little too comfortable here, and it's time you remembered exactly where you stand in the social hierarchy." Sophia stepped forward with her smartphone already activated, clearly intending to record whatever humiliation they had planned while creating evidence they could use for future blackmail or social media destruction. "We could help you understand your position here more clearly." Madison pulled out her own recording device, apparently planning to capture the encounter from multiple angles, while ensuring that Elena's responses could be edited and manipulated to support whatever narrative they wanted to create. It would be educational for everyone involved. Ashley flexed her hands with obvious anticipation for violence, her athletic build and championship medals making the threat of physical assault both credible and immediate. "I think she needs a more direct lesson about respecting her betters." Elena's body automatically shifted into the balanced stance Master Kim had drilled into her through thousands of repetitions, weight distributed for maximum mobility, while her hands remained relaxed but ready for defensive action. But she forced her voice to remain calm and reasonable, establishing her attempts at peaceful resolution for the record. "I'm just here to study and graduate," Elena said clearly, making sure her words would be captured by their recording devices. "I'm not looking for any conflict with anyone." The response was calculated to demonstrate her peaceful intentions while making it clear that she wouldn't submit to intimidation or accept responsibility for conflicts she hadn't initiated. Elena understood that everything she said was being recorded and could potentially be used as evidence in disciplinary proceedings or legal action. "See, that's exactly the problem," Madison sneered, her voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions. "You think you belong here. You think you can compete academically with students whose families have built this community for generations. But we know what you really are." Sophia's political instincts guided her contribution to the psychological assault, delivering character assassination with the precision her senator mother used to destroy political opponents. A charity case taking resources from students who actually deserve them. A welfare recipient who thinks academic handouts somehow make her equal to people who've earned their positions through family achievement and social contribution. Cassandra's smile was pure malice as she delivered what she clearly intended to be the killing blow to Elena's psychological resistance. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to admit on camera that you've been receiving inappropriate academic assistance. Then you're going to withdraw your scholarship application and transfer to a school more appropriate for your socioeconomic background. The demands were designed to be so psychologically devastating that Elena would be permanently broken, regardless of whether she complied. If she submitted to their requirements, the recorded confession would destroy her completely. If she refused, they were clearly prepared to escalate to physical violence while claiming she had been uncooperative and aggressive. Ashley's anticipation for violence was becoming increasingly obvious as she rolled her shoulders like a boxer preparing for combat, clearly hoping Elena would resist so she could justify the physical assault she obviously wanted to inflict. "Trust me, we have resources you can't even imagine. Family connections that reach into every institution that matters. We could make your life impossible in ways you haven't even considered." Elena looked at each of them in turn, her trained eye automatically calculating distances, reaction times, and potential weapons while her mind processed tactical options with the precision Master Kim had taught her through 8 years of preparation for exactly this kind of confrontation. Then she surprised them all by laughing, a sound completely devoid of fear or submission that carried an undertone of confidence they hadn't expected from someone they had systematically terrorized for weeks. "You have absolutely no idea who you're dealing with, do you?" Elena asked, her voice carrying a new note of authority that none of them had heard before. Before anyone could respond, Jamie Chen rounded the corner, carrying camera equipment for the student newspaper, clearly having received Elena's text message about the planned confrontation. Jamie immediately began recording the encounter while speaking loudly enough to establish clear witness testimony. "Cassandra, having another one of your friendly conversations with scholarship students?" Jamie asked, making sure the confrontation was thoroughly documented while positioning herself to provide Elena with potential backup if the situation escalated to physical violence. The moment was broken by Jamie's arrival, but the escalation was inevitable. Cassandra's followers dispersed with obvious reluctance, their disappointment at being denied the opportunity for recorded humiliation clearly visible. But Cassandra herself remained for a moment longer, delivering a threat with venomous intensity that carried the weight of unlimited family resources. "This isn't over," she whispered with absolute conviction. "Not even close. You have no idea what you're dealing with when you challenge people like us." That night, Elena trained harder than she ever had before in her 8 years under Master Kim's instruction. He put her through advanced combat scenarios she had never experienced, involving multiple attackers in confined spaces, weapons defense, and fighting while protecting others who couldn't defend themselves. The intensity was brutal, designed to prepare her for violence that went far beyond typical bullying into territory that could involve serious injury or worse. "The warrior's greatest victory is the fight that never happens," Master Kim said, as they concluded the session with meditation and breathing exercises designed to maintain mental clarity under extreme stress. "But the warrior must always be ready for the fight that cannot be avoided. Your enemies are escalating because they sense their power slipping. When cornered, privileged predators become most dangerous." The guidance carried the weight of decades of experience preparing students for real-world violence, but also reflected Master Kim's understanding that Elena was facing something more dangerous than typical teenage bullying. Cassandra Blackwell possessed resources and family connections that could destroy lives through legal, financial, and social pressure that most adults couldn't handle, let alone a 17-year-old scholarship student from a working-class family. Meanwhile, Cassandra's campaign against Elena intensified with corporate-level sophistication that demonstrated both unlimited resources and complete moral bankruptcy. Cyber attacks crashed Jamie Chen's newspaper website and deleted weeks of investigative work, including evidence files that had documented systematic harassment against multiple scholarship students over several years. Elena's scholarship documents mysteriously disappeared from the guidance counselor's office, requiring her to rebuild her entire application file from backup copies while facing artificial deadlines that made the process nearly impossible to complete successfully. Rumors spread through social media about her academic integrity, carefully crafted to sound plausible while being impossible to disprove definitively without access to internal academic records. The psychological pressure was calibrated with surgical precision, to break Elena's focus and academic performance, creating the evidence Cassandra needed to justify her narrative about undeserving scholarship students being unable to handle Thornfield's academic demands. Every missing document, every technical failure, every moment of distraction was designed to create a downward spiral that would ultimately confirm the stereotypes about working-class students being inherently inferior. But Elena had learned patience and strategic thinking from 8 years of martial arts discipline. She maintained her academic performance through determination and superior preparation, rebuilt her scholarship documentation through careful organization and backup systems, and continued building alliances with other victims of Cassandra's harassment while preparing for the inevitable final confrontation. The third encounter was different from the previous two, far more dangerous and calculated with precision that demonstrated Cassandra's willingness to escalate beyond psychological warfare into territory that could result in serious injury. Elena was in the chemistry laboratory after hours, making up work disrupted by her Sabotage textbooks when Cassandra appeared in the doorway with all 3 of her followers arranged in military formation. The building was nearly empty at that hour. Security cameras had been mysteriously malfunctioning in that wing for several days, and the closest faculty member was 3 floors away grading papers in a soundproof office. The isolation was complete and clearly intentional, representing the culmination of weeks of careful planning to create the perfect opportunity for whatever Cassandra had planned. "No witnesses this time," Cassandra announced, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had planned every detail with corporate-level thoroughness. "No interruptions, no rescue, no escape." Elena activated the digital voice recorder Master Kim had given her and slipped it into her jacket pocket, the device designed to capture evidence while remaining undetectable during physical confrontation. 8 years of tactical training had taught her to prepare for multiple contingencies, including scenarios where legal evidence might be the only protection against wealthy families with unlimited resources for covering up their children's crimes. "You've been a persistent problem since the day you contaminated our school," Cassandra continued, advancing slowly while her followers moved to strategic positions that blocked every exit and eliminated any possibility of outside intervention. "Do you have any idea how much political capital my father has spent trying to get your scholarship revoked through official channels?" Sophia blocked the main laboratory exit while pulling out her smartphone to record Elena's humiliation, her political instincts recognizing the value of documented evidence for future blackmail opportunities. Madison positioned herself near the emergency door while activating her own recording device, ensuring that multiple angles would capture whatever degradation they had planned. Ashley cracked her knuckles with obvious anticipation for violence, her athletic training evident in the way she balanced her weight and positioned her hands for maximum striking effectiveness. Her smile was predatory as she anticipated the physical confrontation she had been hoping for since their campaign against Elena had begun. Elena remained motionless at the laboratory bench, centering herself the way Master Kim had taught her through thousands of hours of meditation and mental preparation. Her breathing remained steady and controlled, while her mind calculated distances, reaction times, and tactical possibilities with the precision of someone who had trained for exactly this scenario. "But we realized something important during our investigation of your background," Cassandra said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who believed she held ultimate power over her opponent. "Sometimes you have to handle problems personally. Sometimes you have to create the evidence you need rather than waiting for others to provide it." The implication was unmistakable and terrifying in its calculated malice. Cassandra intended to fabricate evidence of academic misconduct or behavioral problems, possibly involving physical assault, that could be portrayed as Elena's aggression rather than their coordinated attack. The plan demonstrated both strategic sophistication and complete disregard for Elena's basic human rights. "Here's what's going to happen," Cassandra announced with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience from everyone around her. "You're going to get on your hands and knees like the animal you are. You're going to crawl across this floor eating dirt and filth while admitting that you're worthless trash who doesn't belong anywhere near decent students." Sophia's laugh was like poison as she focused her camera on Elena's face, anticipating the complete psychological breakdown they expected to capture. "You're going to beg us to help you transfer to a school more appropriate for your kind. Somewhere you won't have to pretend to be something you're not." Madison added her own contribution to the psychological assault, her voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. "We're going to record every degrading second of it. The video will go viral across every social media platform, tagged to your real name and college applications. No university will touch you after seeing what you really are." The demands were designed to be so psychologically devastating that Elena would be permanently broken regardless of whether she complied. If she submitted to their requirements, the recorded humiliation would destroy her completely and follow her for the rest of her life. If she refused, they were clearly prepared to escalate to physical violence while claiming she had been uncooperative and aggressive. Ashley's anticipation for violence was becoming increasingly obvious as she flexed her hands and shifted her weight, clearly hoping Elena would resist so she could justify the assault she had been fantasizing about for weeks. "Your mother's sacrifices will mean nothing. Your academic dreams will be destroyed. You'll spend the rest of your life knowing that your betters put you in your place when you got too ambitious." Elena finally broke her silence, her voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flow through her system as her body prepared for the confrontation that could no longer be avoided through diplomatic means. "That's not going to happen," she said clearly, establishing her refusal to submit while maintaining the reasonable tone that would support her legal position. "You need to leave this room immediately and stop harassing me and other students." The response was calculated to establish her attempts at peaceful resolution for legal protection, exactly as Master Kim had trained her to do in situations where violence might become necessary for survival. Every word was being recorded by her hidden device, creating evidence of her restraint and their escalating aggression. Cassandra's face twisted with rage at Elena's refusal to submit to her authority, the defiance representing a fundamental challenge to everything she believed about social hierarchy and inherited superiority. The resistance was intolerable because it suggested that wealth and family connections might not be sufficient to control someone who possessed genuine strength and moral courage. "You don't get to make demands here," Cassandra snarled, abandoning any pretense of reasonableness as her true nature emerged under pressure. "You're nobody from nowhere, and it's time you learn to accept reality." Ashley lunged forward with obvious violent intent, her hands reaching out to grab Elena and force her into the degrading position they had demanded. The physical contact represented the legal threshold Master Kim had warned her about, the moment when self-defense became not only justified but necessary for survival. But Ashley's attempted assault encountered something she hadn't expected and wasn't prepared for. Elena Rodriguez was no longer the frightened scholarship student who had arrived at Thornfield 4 months earlier, hoping to remain invisible until graduation. She was the product of 8 years of intensive martial arts training under one of the most demanding instructors in Connecticut. 8 years of preparation for exactly this moment when diplomatic solutions would fail and physical capability would determine whether justice or privileged tyranny would prevail. Elena's response was instantaneous and overwhelming. 8 years of training under Master Kim's demanding instruction, flowing through her body with the fluid precision of someone who had practiced these techniques thousands of times under pressure. Ashley's attempted grab encountered empty air as Elena sidestepped with minimal effort, using her opponent's momentum against her with textbook precision that would have made Master Kim proud. The counterattack came so quickly that Ashley barely had time to register what was happening before she found herself on her knees, her wrist locked in a submission hold that brought immediate and intense pain without causing permanent damage. Elena maintained the hold just long enough to demonstrate complete control before releasing her opponent and stepping back to a defensive position. 8 years of martial arts training, Elena said calmly, her voice carrying a new note of authority that none of them had heard before. Second-degree black belt in multiple disciplines, regional sparring champion 3 years running, Master Kim's Academy downtown, you picked the wrong target. The revelation hit Cassandra's group like a physical blow, shattering every assumption they had made about Elena's capabilities and vulnerability. The quiet scholarship student they had been systematically tormenting was actually a highly trained fighter, capable of defending herself against multiple attackers, with potentially devastating effectiveness. Ashley struggled to her feet, nursing her wrist and staring at Elena with a mixture of shock, pain, and newfound respect that replaced her earlier confidence completely. The casual arrogance she had displayed moments earlier was gone, replaced by the uncertainty of someone who had just discovered that their intended victim was actually a dangerous opponent who had been holding back. Sophia's smartphone trembled in her hands as she realized that she had been recording evidence of their own aggressive behavior, rather than Elena's humiliation. The video would show Ashley attempting to physically force Elena into a degrading position, followed by a textbook example of appropriate self-defense that demonstrated both restraint and lethal capability. Madison backed toward the emergency exit, apparently recognizing that the tactical situation had shifted dramatically against them. Her earlier bravado evaporated as she understood that they were no longer dealing with a helpless victim, but with someone who possessed the skills and training to protect herself effectively against any escalation they might attempt. Cassandra stood frozen in the center of the laboratory, her mind struggling to process the complete reversal of power dynamics that had just occurred in the space of a few seconds. Everything she thought she knew about social hierarchies and personal strength had been proven wrong by someone she had dismissed as inherently inferior. "Here's what's actually going to happen," Elena said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who now controlled the situation completely. "You're going to delete any recordings you've made of this encounter. You're going to stop harassing me and every other student you've been targeting. You're going to publicly apologize for the lies you've spread about my academic integrity." The demands were reasonable but non-negotiable, delivered with the confidence of someone who had demonstrated the capability to enforce them if necessary. Elena's transformation from victim to victor was complete, achieved through preparation, strategic thinking, and the willingness to defend herself when peaceful options were exhausted. "And you're going to leave me alone permanently," Elena continued, her calm certainty more intimidating than any threat of violence could have been. "Because this entire conversation has been recorded, including your demands that I crawl and eat dirt while you filmed it. I also have months of evidence documenting your systematic harassment campaign against scholarship students." Sophia stammered something about their family's influence and political connections, apparently hoping that threats of retaliation would restore their lost authority. But the words lacked conviction, delivered by someone who no longer believed in her own power after witnessing its limitations when confronted by genuine strength. "Your family's money and connections won't protect you from the consequences of assault, harassment, and attempted coercion," Elena replied, pulling out her recording device to show them that their entire attack had been documented with professional thoroughness. Federal civil rights violations involving economic discrimination in educational settings carry serious penalties that even your influence might not be able to make disappear. The threat of legal consequences was far more serious than any social embarrassment they might face. Elena's documentation would support criminal charges for harassment, intimidation, and assault, charges that carried potential federal implications given the systematic nature of their campaign against scholarship students. Madison made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation, threatening Elena's scholarship and academic future through her family's connections to the school administration and board of directors. But the words rang hollow, delivered by someone who had just been definitively outmaneuvered by an opponent she had catastrophically underestimated. "My academic record speaks for itself," Elena responded with quiet confidence that carried the weight of genuine achievement rather than inherited privilege. "My grades are earned through hard work and ability, not family connections or inherited advantages. Any investigation of my academic integrity will only confirm what everyone already knows, that I belong here because I've earned it through merit, not birthright." The confrontation ended not with violence or dramatic gestures, but with the simple reality that Cassandra's group no longer possessed any credible threat to wield against Elena. Their campaign of psychological warfare had been based on the assumption that she was weak and isolated, assumptions that had been thoroughly and definitively disproven when they finally pushed her into a corner. One by one, Cassandra's followers filed out of the laboratory, their earlier confidence replaced by the subdued demeanor of people who had just learned an important lesson about the difference between inherited privilege and earned strength. Ashley was the first to leave, cradling her wrist and avoiding eye contact with everyone, her athletic scholarships and college prospects now in jeopardy due to her involvement in documented assault. Sophia followed close behind, her smartphone tucked away, and her earlier political confidence replaced by the nervous energy of someone who understood that recorded evidence of her participation in systematic harassment could destroy her mother's political career. Madison left without speaking, her real estate empire family connections suddenly seeming inadequate protection against federal civil rights violations. Cassandra herself was the last to leave, her face showing the confusion and fear of someone whose entire worldview had been challenged and found completely wanting. The daughter of one of Connecticut's most powerful tech moguls had been systematically outmaneuvered by a scholarship student from Hartford's working-class neighborhoods, and the reversal was so complete that she couldn't even begin to process what had gone wrong. Elena remained in the laboratory for several minutes after they departed, allowing her adrenaline to subside while processing what had just occurred. The confrontation she had been preparing for over months of escalating harassment was finally over, resolved not through excessive violence, but through the demonstration of capability backed by justice and moral clarity. The recording device had captured everything, from their demands for degrading submission to Ashley's attempted assault to Elena's restrained but effective self-defense. The evidence would support her position completely while documenting the systematic nature of their harassment campaign and the criminal behavior they had escalated to when psychological pressure failed. But more importantly, Elena understood that her victory extended far beyond personal vindication. Her refusal to submit to privileged tyranny had broken the cycle of intimidation that had driven away 6 other scholarship students over the past 3 years. Her documentation and Jamie Chen's investigative reporting would expose the systematic nature of the discrimination while providing other victims with the evidence and methods they needed to fight back effectively. The next Monday brought a transformed school environment that reflected the permanent changes Elena's courage had initiated throughout Thornfield Preparatory's entire social structure. Cassandra was conspicuously absent from her usual position of power in the student hierarchy, rumors suggesting her family had quietly transferred her to a private institution in Switzerland to avoid the legal and social consequences building around the harassment campaign. The Blackwell family's legal team had apparently advised immediate damage control measures, including Cassandra's removal from Connecticut and comprehensive settlement negotiations with Elena's family that would prevent criminal charges while providing financial compensation for the documented harassment campaign. The technology mogul who had taught his daughter to destroy opponents through systematic psychological warfare discovered that his methods were less effective when confronted by someone who possessed both genuine capability and complete moral clarity. Ashley attended school with her wrist in a professional brace, avoiding eye contact with everyone and speaking to no one about the incident that had ended her athletic career before it truly began. Her state championship records and college scholarship opportunities had evaporated overnight when university recruiters learned about her involvement in systematic harassment and attempted assault against a scholarship student. The incident had taught Ashley harsh lessons about the real-world consequences of privileged misconduct that her family connections couldn't minimize or eliminate. Her athletic abilities, which she had always assumed would provide her with unlimited opportunities regardless of her character, proved worthless when combined with documented evidence of criminal behavior. Sophia and Madison sat separately in the cafeteria, their previously unbreakable alliance fractured by fear of association with the group's spectacular downfall. Their families had received detailed documentation of their roles in the harassment conspiracy, along with legal warnings about potential civil rights violations and criminal charges if similar behavior continued. Senator Whitmore's political career faced serious questions about her daughter's documented participation in systematic discrimination against working-class students, while the Cross family's real estate empire discovered that their local political influence provided inadequate protection against federal civil rights investigations. Principal Morrison announced comprehensive new anti-harassment policies with external oversight designed to ensure that family connections and donations would no longer influence disciplinary decisions. The changes were permanent, written into school policy rather than being temporary adjustments that could be quietly reversed when attention faded. Dr. Patterson personally apologized to Elena for questioning her academic integrity, offering her advanced placement opportunities and research positions that reflected her genuine capabilities rather than the suspicions that had been planted by influential parents. Teachers who had been influenced by the Whisper campaign now competed to provide additional support and recognition for her exceptional performance. Jamie Chen's newspaper investigation revealed the full scope of Cassandra's systematic campaign, documenting similar harassment against 8 other scholarship students over 3 years. The comprehensive nature of the abuse shocked even veteran educators and prompted district-wide policy changes designed to prevent future discrimination based on economic status. Elena's academic performance soared without constant sabotage and psychological warfare disrupting her focus and preparation. Her chemistry scores reached new heights, earning praise from teachers and recognition that her excellence stemmed from genuine ability rather than any artificial assistance or special accommodation. But the real victory extended far beyond personal vindication or academic achievement. Other victims of Cassandra's harassment began speaking out, supported by Elena's documented methods and Jamie's investigative reporting. The evidence accumulated into a comprehensive case that prompted federal civil rights investigators to examine educational discrimination practices throughout Connecticut's private school system. The confrontation in the chemistry laboratory became legendary among students throughout the region, not for its violence, but for its demonstration that victims could become victors when they refused to accept injustice passively and prepared themselves thoroughly for the inevitable confrontation with systematic oppression. Master Kim was proud but unsurprised when Elena described the encounter during their next training session, his experienced eyes recognizing the precision and restraint she had demonstrated under extreme pressure. "You used minimum force to achieve maximum justice," he observed with satisfaction. "You demonstrated the warrior's way, strength in service of righteousness rather than revenge." The validation from her instructor meant more to Elena than any academic recognition or social victory, representing 8 years of disciplined preparation that had culminated in the perfect application of everything he had taught her about tactical thinking, moral courage, and the strategic use of force in service of justice. 6 months later, Elena received early admission to Stanford University with a full scholarship enhanced by letters of recommendation that highlighted not only her academic excellence, but also her demonstrated leadership in promoting educational equity and opposing systematic discrimination. The girl who had been forced face down into the mud by privileged bullies was now recognized as a symbol of merit-based achievement and moral courage. Cassandra Blackwell's fate served as a cautionary tale about the limitations of inherited privilege when confronted by genuine strength and strategic intelligence. She had been expelled from 2 different private schools in Europe after attempting to run similar harassment campaigns, only to discover that her methods no longer worked in environments where administrators had been warned about her tactics and were prepared to hold her accountable. The technological resources and family connections that had once seemed unlimited proved inadequate when confronted by someone who possessed both genuine capability and complete moral clarity. Cassandra's attempted tyranny had been systematically dismantled by a scholarship student who understood that true strength came from preparation, principle, and the courage to stand up when others could not. Elena's story spread through social media and student networks nationwide, inspiring others to document harassment systematically and fight back strategically rather than suffering in silence. Her documented approach influenced policy development at universities throughout the country, providing frameworks for addressing privilege-based exclusion while promoting genuine academic excellence based on merit rather than family connections. Years later, as Dr. Elena Rodriguez conducted groundbreaking research in neural regeneration therapy at Stanford's medical school, she would receive messages from students across the country who had used her methods to overcome their own battles with systematic harassment and discrimination. Her transformation from victim to victor had created ripple effects that extended far beyond her personal victory. The quiet scholarship student who had only wanted to study in peace had become a symbol of resistance against privilege and prejudice, proving that sometimes the most dangerous person in any room is the one who combines genuine capability with strategic intelligence and absolute moral clarity. Elena's impact was just beginning, her story serving as proof that justice sometimes arrives not through official channels or institutional protection, but through individuals who refuse to surrender to those who mistake inherited privilege for earned superiority. Her victory demonstrated that the greatest transformations come not from defeating enemies, but from changing the systems that create enemies in the first place. The girl who had been forced into the mud had risen to prove that true strength comes not from the ability to inflict damage, but from the courage to stand up when others cannot, and the wisdom to use that strength in service of justice rather than personal vendetta. Her legacy would inspire generations of students to believe that merit and determination could triumph over privilege and prejudice when combined with proper preparation and unwavering moral courage. Sometimes the quietest person in the room possesses the most dangerous combination of all: genuine capability, strategic intelligence, and the absolute refusal to accept injustice. Elena Rodriguez had embodied that combination perfectly, transforming not just her own life, but the entire structure of power and privilege that had seemed unbreakable until she proved otherwise.